good.
Okay.
Immediately turn around. What's
Lamar.
up, bro? You like my
Alright, you guys ready to kick this off?
Immediately
Yep.
Yes.
Alright, so welcome. I'm H. Mumbai. This is what I affectionately refer to as NWAE cheat codes. You guys know what cheat codes are? Old school
Yes.
video games, right?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not showing my age too much.
I don't think any of us are that young.
Okay, well, I don't know. GTA, Backpack Pack, you know, all that stuff. So yeah, as HM2 Brown said, this study stuff, it's meant to be supplementary, right? It's not going to give you guys all the answers to the test. We're going to go over some things that we have seen before. The purpose of my lesson specifically, I call it cheat codes. It's not really. I mean, it's pretty cut and dry. It's actual factual data, but things that I've learned over time that have really helped me kind of successfully navigate the exam, all right? Before I get started real quick, I kind of like to know who I'm talking to. So if you guys could just say your name, where you're from, and then just how many times you've taken the exam. And if it's first time, just say first time. Go ahead.
HM3 Romello, I'm from New York City, and this is my third time taking this exam.
Third time. Okay.
No, fourth, sorry.
Four. Okay. How many years you been in?
5.
Oh, okay. All right.
This is H3 Jones. I'm from California. This will be my second time taking the exam.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
I'm H3 TV from Kansas, and this will be my second time taking the second class exam.
Perfect. Okay.
HM3 Anderson. I'm from North Carolina. This will be my first time.
Okay. Awesome. North Carolina. I love North Carolina. That's where this came from. You?
H3 Francois from Brooklyn, New York, and this will be my 5th.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Happy Boxing Day.
So actually, believe it or not, my lesson is probably going to help out the guys who've taken it before, because we're going to use the profile sheets to our advantage. We're going to break those down and kind of show you guys how to use that to successfully beat the test, okay? First time, that's okay. I'm going to show you my first profile sheet. I did do very well on that first test, but don't beat yourself if you don't, because the following tests are going to be easier once you have that, okay? So it's a process, right? All right. So, talking points is what we're going to go over, the test and the final multiple score, how they work, all right? Some of you guys that have been in for a while, you might already kind of know, but we're going to break it down Barney style, make sure you totally understand it. Your profile sheet, strategies and how to use it. We're going to go over the bibs a little bit, basically just go on Navy Cool and kind of break those down. Questions to look for, like things that I actually, as I'm going through the bibs that I'm specifically looking for, right? And then how to study, and we're going to do an example. So I'm going to pull up medical waste. Oh, you got one? Thank you. So I'm going to pull up regulated medical waste, and we're just going to go through it together. I did have it highlighted prior. It would have made it a little bit faster, but that's okay, because we can break it down real quickly, kind of run through it, and I'll show you exactly what I do, okay? All right. So, who am I, and why should you listen to me, right? So, I am H1 Buyer. I have been in the Navy for 11 years. I started my career in Camp Pendleton, California in 2011. So the only thing I wanted to do was go to Afghanistan and fight terrorists, right? The Navy said, nope, we don't have any deployments for you. Tough luck. So I was actually going to separate. Luckily, I had a really good LPO. He said, hey, why don't you go to a C school, get something out of the Navy, maybe pick up more rank, right? And I did. I went to Biomed C school, of all things. I was starting to second there. That's the only rank that I made without picking up off the test. I'm not a map sailor, historically. From there, I went to Naples, Italy. I graduated first in my class. So that was kind of when the Navy started turning around for me. I was like, this is pretty cool. I get to go to Europe, right? Got to saw like 20 different countries. And I finally deployed out of there. So I went to the Horn of Africa, did some support missions with the SEALs, EOD, things like that. From there, I got selected to go to Marine Special Operations Command in North Carolina. Loved it. Went to Basic Airborne, went to SEER, went to the Basic Reconnaissance Corps, did a lot of really cool things. Became the LPO out there, actually. And that's kind of when I realized I didn't want to be a biomed tech. I really liked awards and helping sailors out, showing them where they could go and where they should go, right? Especially with how like diverse my career had been. So I archived biomed and I became a career counselor. That's what I do now, right? So I've done it pretty much all, but for the purpose of this course, really why you guys should listen to me is, like I said, alluded to, I have never been a map sailor, and map kind of came out more when I was a second class, right? It really wasn't a thing. We did have a C map and things like that, but My third class exam, I scored an 80, which if you guys aren't aware, we'll go into that. That's the highest score you can get on the test. Second class, I struggled a little bit because I didn't really know these strategies. I got 70s and things like that, but it wasn't enough to pick up because there was a change in kind of how the final multiple was broken down, but I did get starred to second in biomed. And then first class, I scored an 80 again, and that's how I made first class, right? And then actually on my last chief exam, I scored a 72, which is still in the 99 percentile, right? So the strategies I have, I feel like they work. A lot of people, they tell me, they're like, all right, Rain Man, you know, like whatever, but I'm not really that smart. Like if you guys really look at me in math and things like that, I historically get D minuses and things like that. I don't do very well. But this is a multiple choice exam, and there are ways to kind of beat it, all right, and outsmart it. So we're gonna go into that, all right? All right, so the exam, how does it work? So first and foremost, this is just a basic profile sheet. This isn't one of mine. I'm gonna kind of show you guys one of mine, but when I teach Navy Advancement for First Term Success Workshop, we always use this one. It's an ABH2. Can you guys all see this up here? Is it too small? You in the back?
Sorry.
Cool. Everybody good? Okay, cool. All right. So basically, your bottom line right here is your final multiple score. All right. And you guys are probably that have taken it before. You're already aware you have to get a higher number than this number to make the next rank, right? So standard score is part of it. Your evals, time and rate, awards, education, and pass, not advance, right? So the exam score, like I said, if you get an 80, it's gonna put you with the average of candidates that advanced got versus you, okay? Same thing with the eval average, things like that. So some of this stuff you control, most of it you can't. The exam you can, all right? And that's historically, like I said, where I've kind of like got a cut above everybody else. So what we're gonna go into is how to use this, right? To maximize your study time, not waste a bunch of time, right, with studying. So if you haven't taken it before, you're not gonna have this. But if you have, what you guys need to start looking at specifically is what percentile you're in, the number of questions, and the percentile that you were for those questions, right? So you might see that, let's just use an example, right? That you were in the 42 percentile, right? You scored pretty low, but maybe that section only has like 5 questions. Does it really matter that you scored that low in the scheme of the test? No, it really doesn't. So what you need to do is highlight the big ones first. Be like, what has 25 questions? What has 40 questions? Things like that, and how did I do with that? If you got in the 80, 90 percentile, you don't need to focus on that stuff that much because those questions don't typically change. And I'm saying this again from experience, you're gonna see them and you're gonna recognize them. That's the beauty of multiple choice tests, okay? So instead of being like on, you just pull up the bibs and you're just like, oh my God, I have like a million bibs to look at. You can really highlight the specific things that you do need to focus on and maximize that 2 weeks, month, whatever you guys had to study, okay? The other thing that I wanted to explain with the test, if you guys weren't aware, is it's on a bell curve, right? So really what you're trying to do is you're trying to beat your peers. So when all your friends are using Blue Jacketeer and things like that, I'm not knocking on Blue Jacketeer. There's some good stuff there. You can probably pick up a couple questions, but if everyone's using Blue Jacketeer and you are too, you guys are gonna get the same score. You're not gonna beat them, right? So you have to think outside the box and how you're gonna find questions that nobody else is gonna get right. All right, so at this point, I'm gonna pull up my third class one because there's something else that I wanna highlight for you guys. I apologize for the load times. All right, so, and if you guys ever wondering where all your profile sheets are, it's on your ETG, okay, on quick links. So you can pull these up at any time and it still has every single one of mine. All the way back to HM Tree. So, on this one specifically, you see I scored an 80, right? Blew the final multiple out of the water. I was way above everybody else. Great. But what I really wanted to highlight with this one is you look at the number of questions, right? And back then it was 175 because we still did PMKE questions. You guys do it on NKO now, but back in the day we used to have the test on it, right? So when I actually add up all my points, it was like 132 out of 175 that I got right. That's a 75%. It's a C, okay? So You don't need to know everything, you just need to know more than everybody else. So get out of your head about thinking that you need to get these perfect scores to get an 80, because that's not the case. Score higher than 99% of your peers, you need a C, all right? It's a little less overwhelming that way, right?
It's so sad to think about.
Yeah, it's crazy though. And you guys, I won't do it for every single one, but you will see, if you did do the math on every single one of mine, it's generally like a mid, low C, even like high B minus that I score when I get in the 99th percentile, okay? So again, you need to think of ways that you're gonna beat everybody, not be the same as everybody, all right? So HM2, I'm not gonna waste too much time on those. Again, I was in biomed C school, so I got 2 70s, and then I got a 60 here because I knew I was about to graduate and I didn't care. And honestly, I was getting pretty jaded because I was like, I scored 2 70s and I didn't pick up. You know, you guys, I'm sure have been there. People have taken it a couple times, you just get jaded, right? But first class. So first class, again, actually at the time in Naples, I'm just gonna say the Chiefs mess didn't really like me that much. Maybe it's the tattoos, personality thing, I don't really know. But they weren't really rooting for me, right? So I knew that I was gonna have to do well on the exam. Sorry, if I was gonna actually pick up first class. But you guys will notice that I took it twice, if it's gonna work. And this is kind of when I developed my strategy, and it's worked for first class and it worked for chief, okay? So, my first class exam, I scored a 61, all right? I didn't know what I was getting into. I just come out of biomed C school, right? So it was kind of just a test for me. I was just like, let's see what I know, right? I studied what I thought I should know, checked out the bibs. Didn't go too crazy with it because I think I was at 6 years then. So I wasn't like, oh, I'm like rushing for first class, you know what I mean? I was like, let's just see what this is about, right? But what I did use this profile sheet for was the next test. Because I looked at these and I was like, again, where am I bad, right? So I looked at naval heritage and I said, okay, I got 2 out of 5. Do I give a shit? No. It's 3 questions, right? It's not a big deal. And if I'm scoring a C minus to get above everybody else, I don't care about naval heritage. I'm not going to waste my time studying that. Does not matter. They could have 9 bibs for naval heritage. If you know there's 5 questions for it, why would you waste your time on 9 bibs for 5 questions, right? You're just killing yourself for no reason. It doesn't matter. You may get it, you may not. Who cares, right? So, but what I did look at was, I was like, man, it's been a while because I'm in biomed that I've done healthcare, right? Healthcare admin, programs management, things like that. So I was like, man, that's a whole 20 questions that I need to brush up on. That one I could improve, right? Same with, there was another one, it's healthcare and treatment, right? That was 14 questions. Even though that's in the 86th percentile, I was like, I could get more questions out of that. These ones, again, medical supply, clinical support services, I was like, you know what, like that's not that many questions. So you can make an outline before you start and be like, what am I gonna prioritize, right? Yeah, maybe I wanna get a couple more questions out of these things, but first I wanna highlight the big ones, right? Even if you were in the 86th percentile, get more questions out of that, right? And then you're gonna fucking make your study time a lot more productive, all right? So, and I could show you my chief ones too, but basically I did the same thing. So, well, the next one after this, I got an 80, right? Just using that strategy. Chief exam, same thing. First time, I think I got like a 62. This last one, I got a 72, right? It works. And the better you do, the more pass not advanced points you get, right? So it just helps you keep, oops, sorry, this mouse is sensitive. All right, so that's your profile sheet. This next page, a lot going on. It basically just breaks down the percentages. You guys can ignore these 2 columns right here. For E4, E5, it kind of just tells you what the percentage is of each thing, right? So your PMA from your eval is worth 38% with final multiple. Your test is actually worth 47%. So even if you have an MP, right, you still have more of a chance with the test if you can score that 80, right? It's a big deal. Awards, they are what they are. Either you got awards or you didn't. Sometimes your chain of command helps you, sometimes they don't, right? I've been there, believe me. Pass on advance, more times you take it, the better you do, the more points you get, up to a maximum of 9. And then your time and rate and your education, if you guys have gotten a bachelor's and associates, up to 4 points, right? And those little points can kind of sometimes make a difference. All right, so actually I already jumped into that, kind of derailed your profile sheet. So So your bibs. So this is a quote that I used to say to my wife. I don't know where I got it, so I said unknown, but it's how do you eat an elephant? The answer is one bite at a time, right? So since you guys have already kind of all taken it, and that's why I always ask that at the start, because I don't want to waste too much time with showing you where the bibs are. You guys already know, right? Navy cool, you pull them up, looks overwhelming. But one thing I did want to highlight with the bibs specifically. So we already kind of talked about your strategies and things like that. But with the bibs, the other thing that I'll do is if they're small, like a single page, I read the whole thing. All right, 2 pages, something like that, you have the time to do that. Comprehension is always going to be better than memorization, right? And I think we get so caught up in being like, oh, I can jam through this and highlight what I think matters. Don't do that with the short ones. I never do, all right? The big ones, you're going to have to pick and choose what you think the questions are because they're too big. You can't just continuously read those or read the whole thing. But if it's 2 pages, if you really actually understand what that instruction is saying, right, in 2 pages, which anybody can do, then when the test asks you a question about it, you're going to be able to make a way better educated guess than just memorizing something, you know, like knowing the exact number, because they're generally going to ask something more along the lines of, what is the purpose of this instruction, you know, where would you find the resources for the things like that, right? So if you get it, you'll do better. So let's see here. All right, so we won't pull that up because I don't think we need to. But so I made a timeline for you guys, right? I usually take a month to study, if that. Sometimes it's like 3 weeks, 2 weeks, all right? Your first exam, it's a little different, right? So the third class exam, the first time I took that and got an 80, I was trying so hard. I think I studied for probably like 2 months on that one. I had all the note cards, I had all the flashcards. I really, really, really tried. So I was like, I gotta be a third class, right? So I don't wanna say don't do that, but after you have that profile sheet, after you kind of know what you're dealing with, you know what I mean? And you know what to focus on, you don't need to do that anymore. And even with the third class exam, in hindsight, did I really need to do that? Probably not. I did. And honestly, I feel like it did lay a really solid foundation, right? Because a lot of these questions just keep popping up and it just compounds over time, and then you need to do even less, right? So maybe for the first one, really do make that extra effort. But for everybody else, so 1 month out, right? And you guys are about 3 weeks out, so this will still kind of apply. Assess your weaknesses, create your plan and your outline, and set realistic goals of how you're gonna break those down, right? So there's probably like 30 bibs or something like that, so you might be like, I'm gonna do 2 a day, right? I'm gonna go through 2 of these a day, highlight them, put them in a folder, and have them, so the last week I can, you know, refresh if I have to, but, you know, basically just make a plan with that, however you're gonna do it, and don't make it overwhelming. Don't be like, I need to do 5 a day, because you're not going to, and if you do that, they're gonna suck, you're not gonna comprehend them, it's not gonna be good. Make it easy on yourself. And with a month, you have plenty of time to do that, okay? 3 weeks, you're gonna focus on your largest weak points, like we already talked about. 2 weeks out, so that's when you're gonna start reading your short bibs in their entirety. 1 page, 2 page ones. Again, ensure maximum comprehension, because it's better than memorization, all right? Especially on a multiple choice test, because you can narrow down all those things. 1 week out, you're gonna keep focusing on the things that aren't sticking, right? So all the things that you've highlighted, all those PDFs that you have, and I wish I could show you my share folder how I do it, but I can't, but we'll do one. But the PDFs you have, if you wanna do flashcards, you can too. I like PDFs. But you're gonna go over those again, right? Kind of just refreshing yourself, being like, because again, the test is gonna be more about recognition rather than knowing everything. So you might see one question, it's like 4 forms, right? And you're like, I know it's not the 4s, it's the 5s, it's one of these 2 5 ones, you know what I mean? And you're gonna do better, right? So, and don't kill yourself. Don't get mad at yourself when you don't remember it exactly. Just be like, I kind of remember that. Good. You're gonna do better than most people, right? The other thing I wanted to say with the bibs. So every time, a week out before the exam, I don't worry about memorizing the bib numbers until then, all right? I go on Quizlet, guaranteed somebody has already made a Quizlet with all the instruction numbers. Guaranteed, every time. Like every exam I've taken, I've never had to make that myself. That is a free 10 questions at least, all right? You guys will probably get a brief on quality assurance. The only quality assurance question I've ever seen is what instruction governs quality assurance. Literally, and then that's it. And then they don't even go into anything else, and it's this huge long instruction. So that's one that I think people sleep on a lot, and that's again another 10 questions that's going to put you a cut above everybody else because they don't want to memorize that stuff. It seems crazy, it seems hard, but if you have Quizlet, the things they have on that now, like because it's not just flashcards. You can do the test one where you fill it in. There's so many ways to learn them, and a week out is plenty of time. And then the night before the test, don't study anything else, just study those. Make sure you got those down pat. Even if you're standing in line, you got it on your phone, you're like, I know all these fucking bibs. Like, because they're always gonna ask you what governs this thing. Always. Another one with that. So, Manual of the Medical Department. Super long, P117, right? Crazy. It's always like 4 chapters. And you're like, there is no way I can read all this stuff. Don't. Alright, because what they're gonna ask, and I can remember 2 questions off the top of my head. One was, alright, so there's 4 chapters, and I don't remember the chapter numbers, what they were, but one was records, one was pharmacy, one was physicals, and one was something else, doesn't matter, right? But the question on the test was, where would you look in the man-med if you wanted to destroy a CD? So of those 3 that I gave you, which one would you look in? Records, pharmacy, or physicals? Records, right? It's pretty simple, and that's all you need to know. You just need to know the chapter. You didn't need to read the whole damn book. That, you know what I'm saying? The other question was like, if you wanted to put a female on a submarine, what chapter would you look in? Or like do a medical screening for a female on a submarine, what chapter would you look in? Physicals. And you know the chapter number is chapter 9 or whatever it is. You see what I'm saying? Like, that's the kind of questions that they ask, all right? So don't kill yourself. Don't read the whole book. Even if you want to, you might get 1Z, 2Zs more than everybody else because they might ask something crazy in the weeds like that. But generally, you're going to do better than everybody else if you just know those things, right? All right. So what to look for when studying. So remember, the Navy Chiefs write these tests. They're people just like you and me, and they're not out to get you. Maybe some of them are, but generally, my other asterisk to that is questions that no one knows get thrown out. So when these chiefs are writing these things, they're not looking for the hardest question that no one's gonna know, right? That nobody can figure out. That's like, why would you ask that, right? Like, it's gonna be something to do with your job, right? It's gonna be something that like, because they don't want to write the question that's like trash and honestly, if you didn't know that too, so on the exam, if I don't remember what the percentage is, let's just say if more than 50% of people taking the exam miss that question, they toss it out. So instead of it being a 150 question exam, it'll be 149, right? Because it's just not a fair question. So these are the things that I always look for. So numbers, because of course, right? Numbers, temps, measurements, ratios, things like that. Processes with steps. So they might ask you what the 5-step process of ORM is. If any of you have a pin, like a warfare pin, you know that those are questions that they always ask, right? They want to see that you understand those things. Triage, echelons, like is it echelon 1, 2, 3, right? So processes, steps, and the purposes of those processes, all right? Who's the boss? Is it an enlisted? Is it an officer? Is it the admiral? Is it a provider or foreman with a special NEC, like a Prev Med Tech is in charge of the program? ESO, not ESO, what's the environmental health officer? EHO, right? Like one of the questions I saw in my last one for decedent affairs, it was like, who can authorize a burial at sea? And the answer is the CNO, and I just guessed, but they always ask stuff like that too, right? Where to find the answers. So they don't always want to know that you know verbatim what the answer is. They want to know you know where to find that answer. The bib instructions, things like that. The electronic systems that have those answers, okay? That's generally more what they're looking for than a verbatim, like, no shit, this is the answer. It's gonna be more like, where would you look? Cool. And going more into that, electronic systems used to manage a program. So, imparts for individual augmentees, demos for logistics. And then further breaking that down, acronyms. So they're not gonna ask you every single acronym. The reason I highlight acronyms is because in a question, a lot of times, they'll be like, when submitting a MER, you know, something like that, and you're like, what the fuck is a MER? I don't know. If you know that, you're going to be able to answer the question a lot better. It might not give you the answer, but if you know it's a medical event report, right, you'll be like, I know what we're talking about. I know the systems that go with that, right? So acronyms are very useful too. So as you're going through the bibs, this is the kind of stuff that I'm looking for. And I'm also trying very hard to think like a chief, right? I'm trying to think, if I was picking questions from this test, what would I pick, right? And most people, again, aren't bad people, right? like some are crazy, not gonna lie, but most of the people that have been selected to write this test and pick these questions, I genuinely feel like they're just gonna go through and be like, man, like I feel like I should have known this as a third class. You know, this is something I wish I would have known. Like, I want them to know this, okay? things like that. All right, so we're gonna go through one together. Like I said, I wish that my folder had been up because we could have just done the highlights real quick, but we're just gonna very, very quickly kind of skim through, what is it called? Regulated medical waste. And I'm gonna kind of show you guys just how I do that, all right? I wrote colors help. So I don't have the study, but when I was in HN, the first EAP that I ever went to, there was the first class that got up there, and he quoted like 3 studies that showed colors in your brain really help you categorize things and remember things, all right? So I don't have the proof for it other than that it works for me, and when I'm taking the test, I can literally picture the line in a color in my head, right? It's almost like a filing system in your brain. So generally what I'll do is like, if it has to do with medical, I'll highlight it red or pink. If it has to do with like FMF or augmentation or deployment, highlight it green. If it's, you know, just things like that, right? But you guys can have your own color system, but just know that it does actually kind of help in your brain to catalog those things and recall them, all right? So let me pull up. And this is gonna be kind of hard with this mouse, I'm sorry. It's very, very touchy. I'm gonna do my best, okay? Wait, where's quick links? So, even though you guys already know, we're gonna pull up the bibs anyway. So just in case you didn't know, you will now. There we go. So enlisted. Where are they at? Advancement exam bibs. Is this a mouse too? Or just a clicker?
It might be a mouse.
Kinda looks like one. Just keep going for now. While it loads. Let's put it on. Bibs. Make sure you don't click selector reserve either. You guys will be screwed. Alright. So.
Did you want the E5?
Is this? Oh, that's right. Thank you. Good call. Alright. Let me go back.
Yeah, there's no e-forks, yeah.
Yeah.
Why they've got bibs for it?
I don't know.
That's dumb.
Don't know. Alright. Same instruction, but man, this is really hard to do with this. So, truthfully, what I'm probably not going to highlight too many things, but we'll go over it. Only because this mouse sucks. Well, it doesn't suck, it's just not working very well with this. Alright. So the first thing I do with these is once they pull up, you're not really going to be able to highlight in this. So I'll save a copy into a folder and I'll call it for me HMC bibs, right, 2022. And then that way when I'm done highlighting it, again, I'll have this entire folder, right, of bibs that I've already highlighted and don't need to read again. And then that way too, on the next exam, I don't need to do it again. I've already gone through it. Maybe I'll kind of skim through it and be like, you know, I remember this from the test, something like that, but create a folder for yourself, all right? So, download this, put it on my desktop. I want to open it with something else. I think, because you're going to want to open it with Adobe Pro so you can actually highlight and edit it. Because the other thing you can do with Adobe Pro, or Acrobat or whatever it is, you can organize the pages. So if you don't highlight something, you can just delete the other pages. And then it's even smaller, right? Less overwhelming. I'll get a laser pointer. It bounces off the TV, doesn't even work. Alright. Is this gonna open? It's loading. Alright. Well, that pulls up. You guys got any questions so far? That's what I'm saying. No? Cool. Alright. Apologize for the wait.
What were all the other electronic systems outside of like Deere, Alza, MERS?
So it's going to be dependent on the bids, right?
Right.
So I'm trying to think of other ones that I've seen. Definitely imparts is always on there. So it's like, what is imparts? What you or what system do you use to do individual augmentees, imparts?
There's usually a question like, what does ALTA stand for? Those are usually on there as well.
Yeah. I think the shipboard one, what's that one called? Like SAM or something?
ESAM.
ESAM, yeah.
Oh, yeah,
That's
ESAM's
on there.
Is that the dental one?
DEERZ, the medical event reporting system, right? But you can just try to remember camera's eye, I guess, but it's pretty close. Like. But yeah. Yep. For the immunizations one, it's going to be where do you submit adverse reactions and things like that, like the form in the system. I think that one's VAERS. VAERS is another one that you see. Stuff like that. I don't know if this is going to work. I apologize. Well, that's okay. What I can do, I can't highlight on this one, but we can still kind of skim through it, and I'll just show you what I'm talking about, all right? All right, so skip. Skip all of this. And I know I said purpose, but I'm talking more the purpose of the programs, right? If you really do want to kind of comprehend what we're talking about here, go for it. It's not going to hurt you. I don't waste my time with that stuff. Doesn't matter, right? Cancellation, so it's basically just saying we cancel human instruction Bravo instead, and now we're on Charlie. This is why. Again, doesn't really matter that much. Background, same thing. All right, so right off the bat, it says non-regulated medical waste, right? So I'm gonna want to know what that is. So the other thing too, if you guys haven't ever done correspondence and stuff like that before, evals, all that, the first time that you write a seldom used acronym, you have to spell it out, exactly what it is, right? And then after that, you can use the acronym until the end of time, till the end of the instruction, and they'll never use the actual word again. So you might skip that at the start, and then you're reading this acronym the whole time, you're like, what does this mean? And you're Googling it, but it's always at the start, all right? That's where you find the answer to the acronyms. And then sometimes at the very back, there's also like a list of acronyms, but not always, all right? So if you're ever trying to figure out what an acronym stands for, look at the start of the instruction, because it'll tell you, okay? All right, so action, records management. So again, this is kind of like the cover letter. Not that serious, not that worried about it, right? I did kind of skim it. I saw non-regulated medical waste. Cool, got that, whatever, right? So requirements, there's a whole bunch of stuff in here. I don't care. What did I see right here? This stands out immediately. Thinking like a chief, right?
Mm-hmm.
Boom. I'm gonna wanna know what all these groups are. So this is where I would use my colors, all right? I see culture, stocks, vaccines. Maybe I make that one yellow. Pathological waste, that makes me think like biohazard stuff. I'm gonna make that green. Blood and blood products, I'm gonna make that red, right? Use sharps, orange, whatever. And then you notice, 7 and 4 are used versus unused sharps. So they can be the same color. Just remember 4 and 7, pretty much the same thing. One's used, one's unused, right? Animal waste, I'm gonna make that brown. Like whatever, you have all these colors, this whole palette, but it's gonna help you when you're trying to remember it in your head, what those groups are, okay? And also understand, like, they're not gonna ask you every single one. They're probably gonna pick one, right? So what I would focus more on would be the sharps, because there's 2 of them, right? So they might be like, what groups would you use for sharps? It's gonna be 4 and 7, right? Things like that. And I'm not saying that's gonna be on the exam, but I'm trying to, again, think like a chief. Like, what gives me the best bang for my buck with an instruction, right? Because the other thing with all these instructions, they're probably gonna pick like 2 or 3 questions from the whole thing, right? So you don't wanna kill yourself and go too in the weeds with like these paragraph fucking things. Like what they're gonna do is be like, quick things, right? Things that you should know. Definitions, right? You might wanna touch up on those and know what each one is, but honestly, you should just know. You don't even need to read those paragraphs to know what animal wastes are, to know what blood product wastes are used in. Why would you read all that stuff? Like in your head on the exam, you can be like, well, I bet it's this out of 4 questions. You know what I mean? Like, not that hard, right? So don't waste your time with that stuff either. All right. Biosafety level. There are 4 levels. That's numbered, right? Things like that. You might want to know that. Level 4 is the most stringent. So they might ask you, what's the least stringent? And you'd be like, 1. Because you know 4 is the most stringent, right? That's the kind of stuff that they do. Again, so hazardous waste. The reason I would highlight this, and it might not stick out to you guys, because you'd be like, oh, that's a paragraph thing, but hazardous waste sticks out to me mostly because of the pins that I've gotten. Because every single one asks you what the definition of hazardous waste is, right? So as future second classes and subject matter experts and things like that, you might want to know the definition of hazardous waste. And it's going to be on one of your pins anyway, guaranteed every single one. So maybe know that one too, the definition of hazardous waste, right? All right, so now it's telling you the acronym, which actually it's a little later on in this one, which is weird, but non-regulated medical waste. So you know that the whole instruction is talking about regulated medical waste. So you should know the difference between non-regulated and regulated. So those two paragraphs are gonna matter, right? It's the whole purpose of the instruction. So they're probably gonna give you a question that's something like, you know, you have a piece of gauze soaked in blood. What type of waste is that, right? And it's gonna be, I believe, non-regulated, right? Because regulated, yeah, so, because it's just like a small piece of something. But by reading that paragraph and comprehending it, those two things, instead of memorizing everything about it, you can just in your head, like I haven't studied for this at all and I remember that, right? Like, comprehend it, get it, all right? Those little things. And you can highlight that whole thing, right? And again, so that way when you pull your PDF back up, you look at it and you can skim through everything else. You've deleted all the pages without stuff on it and you're like, okay, yeah, I remember that. Okay, get the gears turning, right?
Yep.
This is gonna tell you what pathological is, all that kind of stuff. And again, more than welcome to look into these, right? But you know, you're not gonna have to look at sharps. You should look at regulated, what counts, which is gonna be like body parts and stuff basically, and things with STDs on them. Human secretions, semen, vaginal secretions, cerebral spinal fluid, things like that, right? You know what chemo trace waste is, whatever. So again, this is gonna kind of say who's in charge. If the instruction has to do with echelons and chains of command and things like that, like there's one called Chief BUMED, that one you're gonna really wanna know who's in charge. For regulated medical waste, it's gonna be more of a medical one. So they're probably, out of the 2 or 3 questions they're gonna ask you, not gonna ask you who's in charge of the program, most likely, right? So you can kind of skip over that. So again, that's using your brain to kind of be like, all right, what really matters in this instruction? EPOC, yeah, again, not really that. And I'm gonna, again, skip most of this because I know there's like 2 or 3 questions and I feel like I'm hitting the ones that might be a thing. Okay, so how are you gonna label your biohazard bins? You put the word biohazard on it, make it red in color. You probably don't even need to highlight that. You can probably read that once and just remember that. See what I'm saying? Like things like that. Like, so as you're skimming it, just be like, all right, and then don't get in your head if you don't highlight it. Just be like, I can remember that. Trust yourself, all right? You're not stupid. None of you are stupid. I'm stupider than all of you. Like I said, you should see my high school grades. Seriously, they're trash. Like, but don't overthink it. Don't stress yourself out, all right? Where are sharps collected? Rigid, red, or clear containers, right? You might see the gooseneck question. But yeah, and then it kind of just keeps repeating itself. It's going into the groups again. I'm like, I don't care. I already know all that stuff, right? Now it's like really talking about like where you put them, all this stuff. Again, they're not going to go that far in the weeds. And even if they do, as long as you kind of know what they are, you're going to be fine. You're going to be able to make that educated guess, right? And at least narrow it down to 2 and probably get the right answer, right? Transport and storage. I did look at this because, again, there's numbers. So pathological waste must be refrigerated immediately and frozen if on site more than 24 hours. Can remain in storage on site up to 30 calendar days if frozen. Those are the kind of things that they'll ask, all right? What else? Same thing with here, non-pathological, 7 calendar days, just little stuff like that, right? The rest of the stuff too, like it's like, okay, entrances to regulated medical waste must remain closed. Okay, no duh, like we don't, you know what I mean? Like if it's self-explanatory too, like sometimes they just have to put stuff in here to cover all their bases, like a CYA for them, right?
Yeah.
That isn't gonna be necessarily a test question, right? Yeah. That's pretty much it. I think at some point it talks about, sterilization, right? So some things need to be incinerated and some things need to be sterilized, right? So you should know the ones that need to be incinerated. And you should also know the sterilization temps for how long, because that's some stuff that they would ask. It's numbers, right? Pretty easy. Training, no one cares. It's not gonna be a test question. That's pretty much it. And then you got this flow chart at the bottom that I never read either, right? Who cares? So that is how I study. And then I save that and I again have a folder, right? I might pick 2 a day. Like I said, I might go from top to bottom. I might, depending on how I feel, right? I might pick the ones that are weak. Whatever you want to do, whatever you're most comfortable with, and build that study material, and then hopefully you pick up. And if you don't, next time's gonna be even easier, right? That's it. All right. Final thoughts. The test is multiple choice. Narrow it down. So most of the time on questions that I don't know, I can at least get it down to 2, for sure, right? Even if it's the form numbers, because, well, and here's another thing for form numbers for you guys. So if you know the bib instruction, generally the form number correlates to it. It's gonna be like the same kind of number code, right? So if it has to do with regulated medical waste, it'll be like in the 6000 series. So if you see, you guys know what I mean by 6000 series, right? So if the BMed instruction is 68 something, that's a 6000 series because it has a 6 at the start. So the form number is probably going to be a 6 something. So if you see a 5 and a 4, it most likely is not going to be those form numbers. It could be. Sometimes it's crazy, sometimes it's weird for some reason, but generally it's going to match that bib number. So if you know the bib numbers, you're already going to be able to narrow down the forms because they're going to give you 2 that look very similar, that are right. One of them's right, and the other 2 are going to be way out in fucking space. Don't pick those ones, right? But those ones will be very different. So you might be like, oh, it's probably one of these ones. Like, it won't be. It's going to be one of the 2 that you can narrow, right? That are close. So multiple choice. That's why I love multiple choice tests. I do very well on them because of that. Because you can outthink them. You know what I mean? You don't actually have to know everything. You don't have to be that smart. You just have to be clever, I guess is the word, right? Questions may answer themselves later. You guys have probably all heard that. So the other thing, when I'm taking the test, I skip everything that I don't know. I don't stress about it. By the end of the test, there's probably at least 30 questions every time that I skipped, that I just don't know, right? Usually, at least 5 answered themselves in the test. It'll have another question that kind of correlates to it, or at least gives me an idea what they're talking about, and I can make a much better guess, right? So now you're down to 25, right? Might even be more. Sometimes it's been like up to 10. But generally when I come back to those ones, instead of stressing and getting hung up on it and being like, oh my God, I can't get past this question, there's still so many more, I don't know any of this stuff, like, forget all that stuff, like, just move on, calm down, right? Come back to it, and then usually by the time you come back to it, you can also look at, all right, in that block of 10 questions, because on the Scantron it's like sets of 10, right? How many A's, B's, and C's and D's do I have? So if you actually have no idea, be like, well, I have no B's in this column, I'm gonna pick B, right? Because mathematically, that makes the most sense, right? They're gonna spread load the questions, right? And also you just have a clearer head when you come back like that. So a lot of times too, you'll just reread it and be like, oh, like I get what it's asking now. Like, so don't get hung up on the questions you don't know. Come back later. Again, Quizlet, week before, night before, in line for the test, memorize the bibs, right? Free 10 questions, easy. If you're stressed, you're doing too much. So when you're studying, if you have 5 bibs again and you're like, this is overwhelming, I can't do this, too much information, you're doing too much. You should never feel like that when you're studying because it's not gonna stick. Even if you don't get through all the bibs, it's better to get through half of them, not stressed out, than all of them stressed the fuck out because you're not gonna remember any of that stuff. Better to remember what you can, right? For the test, bring gum, bring caffeine. Every time, I have a huge thing of gum, I got 2 Red Bulls, I'm ready to go, coffee, I got it all. And I wrote this, I'm being recorded so I probably shouldn't say it, but nicotine, all right? If you use nicotine, don't stop, all right? And that's such a bad thing to say. I'm not encouraging you to use it, but the reason I say that, there have been multiple studies that show that nicotine improves cognition, it improves memory, okay? Like Alzheimer's patients, it actually slows the effects of Alzheimer's. It helps a lot with memorization. So again, I'm not telling you to use nicotine if you don't, but if you do, that's another asset. Don't be afraid to bring that into the test, use it. Make sure whatever you have is gonna calm you down and also stimulate your brain, right? Gum is great because it, like all that nervous energy, you can just like smack away and be like, you know? But have those things available, seriously, like that's another thing, is just being comfortable in your test space, right? And having the things you need to get through it. And that's it. You guys have any questions for me? No? Alright, cool. Well, thank you. Mitchell Mumbai again, if you guys need me, I am in the career counselor office.